So Terry came to visit me in Atlanta. She had tracked me down. We'd only met once, you know, we just had lunch that one time. But in those days you could just make a call and, you know, ask for any new numbers. And so she tracked me down and we had lots of phone conversations. She was quite provocative on the phone, as a matter of fact. But anyway, she said she was coming to Atlanta to visit her old boyfriend who worked at the fort. And so I said, well, where are you going to sleep? You know, she said, oh, I'm going to sleep with you. So I thought, oh, well, that's all right, you know. It turns out she was very active in bed. And loud too. This I was not used to this. You know, back in England, sex was like something out of an old black and white movie. You know, the most people did was do a little groaning and a little sighing. You know, certainly not yelling. But anyway, we had a good time, and I had a couple of dates with a young lady who was the assistant of my dentist. Mostly it was hard to date any southern ladies, any Georgia ladies. You know, they were kind of suspicious of me with my accent. They weren't worried that I was English. They were worried that I was a Yankee. But so anyway, the dental assistant, Marilyn, her uncle was Ted Turner. He owned the Atlanta baseball team with the Channel 17, and later he set up CNN, you know, the worldwide 24/7 network. He was also a racing sailor, as I found out later. Yeah, and he raced in the America Cup. So anyway, I had invited the dentist and his wife to come to dinner Sunday night when Terry was going to be there. And he said, no, we have a river trip. We're going on a river trip. Why don't you and Terry come on the trip with us? And I said, well, okay, well, what does it involve? He said, whoa, it's beautiful. Man, it's beautiful. It's up in the hills, and the river's flowing there pretty good. There's some rapids, but it's very nice, you know. He said we have guides, you know, and we have these big rafts and guides. So that sounded okay. So I said, yes, sign me up. And when I was talking to Terry with our midweek phone conversation, she said, oh, really? She said, I just saw the trailer for a movie. And this movie is about a terrible trip down a river in Georgia, you know. Is that the same river? I said, no, oh, no, I'm sure it's not. No, we have guides and we have the big rafts. I'm sure it's not that, you know. Well, guess what? It was the Chattooga River, the same one that was in the movie Deliverance. Right? And at first it was fine, you know, where the launch area, it was beautiful hills and trees there, and the river was kind of shallow and fast flowing, beautiful clear water, icy cold, by the way, yeah, and because it was coming down from the mountains, you know. So we put in there, and the guides showed up. They had kayaks and crash helmets, and I was like, wait a minute, they're not with us in the raft? Oh, no, they're in the kayaks. They go ahead of you and, you know, help you. I said, well, what's with the crash helmets? They said, well, that's in case they capsize. What do you mean, capsize? I'm beginning to get a whole new feeling about this trip, you know. Nothing like I envisioned, you know.
Not so romantic.
And it was very nice at first. A beautiful, you know, smooth running, fairly shallow water, you know. Until we heard this noise from somewhere ahead of us, you know, this thundering noise, right? And the guides in the kayaks came, you know, sliding past us and paddles splashing in the sunlight, yelling instructions. Of course, we couldn't hear anything over the noise, you know. It sounded like, oh, okay, you know.
Oh, God.
And we went over this edge, you know, the guides disappeared in front of us, and we went over this edge, and the river narrowed, you know, in between these giant boulders, and our asses were pummeled, and the raft was bouncing up and down, you know. So after that, we said, well, that was pretty exciting. The guide says, yeah, just wait. The next one, I think it was called Bull Sluice. And on this one, the river narrowed between these giant boulders, right? And our raft got folded in half, and we were tipped out, you know, flailing in the ice-cold water.
Oh my God.
Fortunately, there was a safety line, a rope across the river, and we were supposed to grab hold of it. I grabbed hold of it and handed myself back to the shore, but Terry was stuck in the middle. The rope was trapped under her life vest.
Oh my God.
And the river was bobbing her up and down in the water.
Oh, poor Terry.
And finally one of the guides went in and pulled her out, you know.
Not you. You were quick to safety.
Yeah. So anyway, at Lockheed, things were progressing on our analytical endeavours, which was organised in such a way that we were going to be able to show that the wings, you know, and in my case, this one particular wing joint, would be able to fly for 30,000 hours, admittedly with some inspections and maybe some repairs. My estimate, I had a shorthand method, my estimate was 8,000 hours. And I told this to the boss. I wasn't very popular for that, because it was all kind of rigged, you know. Lockheed was going to show it was good enough, and then they were going to get, later they were going to get new wings, and that's surely the way it happened. My shorthand method was something I developed at Cessna, which I find was, you know, was a pretty good rough, quick answer, something you could do in the afternoon. You know, it would take the stress cycle in the wing skins, the stress from the ground, from what it was on the ground to when it goes into the air. And that was a fairly large stress cycle, a very large stress cycle on the C5. On the ground it was what we call minus 18,000 pounds per square inch. In other words, in compression. The minus means in compression. All the way up to in 1G flight, steady level flight, was 30,000, plus 30,000. So in other words, a stress cycle of about 50,000 pounds per square inch, right? Which meant, according to my little calculations, it was good for about 8,000 hours, at which time there would be extensive cracks in the wings, you know, such that it wouldn't be safe anymore, yeah. And guess what? Years later, when I visited a friend who was based at Travis Air Force Base in California, there were C5s sitting on the ramp waiting for new wings. So I guess most people knew that would be the end result, you know, but that wasn't what the contract was for. Yeah. So one day at Lockheed, in walked Chuck Tiffany. He was on loan from Boeing, right? And he gave us a lecture on fracture mechanics, which was a science developed by a British physicist back in the 1920s. Griffith, his name was. And that science, he developed the science based on tests of glass being a brittle material. And he was able to show, he did tests, and he was able to match equations to characterize this behavior, where in a brittle material, small cracks can suddenly grow when you have a certain load on them. So it's just like you've seen people cutting glass, they make a cut into it and then just hit it and it'll crack right along that line, right. You know. Yeah. So that's called fracture mechanics. And interesting little trivia bit, in a given material, when it goes from a small crack catastrophically to break the whole thing, that crack travels at the speed of sound in the material.
Wow.
So it is rapid fracture
Yeah.
and can lead to, you know, wings coming off, which you know has happened. Yeah, yeah. So that was interesting. And he claimed he was a real rebel. He was like me. He was kind of a rebel. He said, well, if they would just give me a small piece of the wing with one bolt in it, I could test it and I could tell them if any of their ideas were feasible. And later I realized what he was talking about. He would cycle it between any given load. It didn't really matter what the load was. Cycle it such that the cracks would start growing from the fastener, probably either side of the fastener. And then at a certain number of cycles, it would break the whole thing. Right?
Wow.
And from that he could figure out what if the wing had lots of those little cracks, you know, at that time. He could figure out whether it was feasible to inspect for that based on the crack behavior. Yeah.
Wow.
So, thank you.
Thank you.